The Opinion with Michael J. Now, one thing I've got to bring to your attention is I'm going to take a jab. Yeah, jab. At Jordan Peterson. And this guy just keeps coming up. And probably a very nice guy. Got nothing against him. But I got to tell you, what annoys me is he takes his personal biases, expresses them, and uses his accreditation as a professional to give him a sense of authority. And I don't think he's an authority on these topics. Just saying, folks. That's what I'm saying. But, nonetheless, I can't help but move to him right now, and I'm going to tell you why. It'll all fall together. We have a pattern here. We see a pattern. Loops, beliefs, etc., etc. Go to the main screen. Questions, comments. Always post and chat. Dialogue is greatly appreciated. But just add to the conversation if you can. If you can. Some people can't. Okay. So here we are. Jordan Peterson, one day ago. Today is the December 31, 2024, New Year's Eve. December 24. December 31st, 2024. December 31st. So one day ago, 254 comments. Dr. Peterson, a voice of sanity and wisdom to humanity. I think that's bullshit. I think the guy's okay in the right situation. But to say he's a voice of sanity and wisdom, I think is just bullshit. Utter cow crap. That's all I got to say. So here he is, one day ago, with Lee Jessom. Jordan Peterson. And as I said, don't get me wrong. The gentleman might be quite fine. He seems, he doesn't seem to be like he's violent or anything. It's a good step forward. Very good step. So let's see what he's got to say here.
What was your evidence that the DEI interventions made? What was made worse? What interventions and what was your evidence linking them?
Yes. Okay. So let me walk through. Let me qualify this a little bit. We examined.
Okay. So this is Lee Jessom. He's a professor at Rutgers, Rutgers. He's somewhat controversial. I don't know too much about him, but he's got issues with transgender. Based on what I've superficially been able to perceive. And I got an issue with anybody that's got an issue with anybody that's queer or transgender, and I'll tell you exactly why. Everybody has value and worth. Everybody has a right to live without oppression or suppression. Doesn't matter who you are. Simple as that. I just want to make that clear. Secondly, I'm going to move ahead to 407 on this tape or video because that's all I'm going to take from this. I'll leave a link so if anybody wants to look at the whole episode, by all means do so. I'm just going to move ahead to around 407 or thereabouts. And here we go, 405. So now the conversation has come back to Mr. Peterson here. Right here. He's at attention. He's got his full attention. He's relaxed. Okay, so everybody relaxed? Be relaxed.
Advocate hat.
Yes.
And I'm going to play Robin D'Angelo, despite wearing this Trump badge.
Despite wearing this Trump badge. So, if you're wearing a Trump badge, obviously you're a proponent of Trump being a president-elect and president. And of Trump's policies and concepts. And concepts, you say? He's got no policy. because he hasn't thought anything. All he's got is concepts, and the concepts are whatever somebody brings to him that sound good to him in order to incorporate what makes him look good. This is Donald Trump. And I'm going to tell you, this is the same thing with Pierre Poilievre in Canada. No policy and only concepts. That's all they got. And the concepts are just concepts. But they're not concepts. There's nothing behind them. The only thing that the Conservative Party or the Republican Party really have, which they've always used on a regular basis over many decades, is tax breaks. That is all they start off with. That's it. The dollar tax breaks, and we're going to make your life better. All these promises. And you know how that works out. I'm going to tell you another thing. Stephen Harper, I think it was back in 2011. Cudgel Stephen Harper. You don't read about any of this stuff. An economist from East York, Toronto, ended up moving out west towards Alberta. This guy Jordan Peterson, or gentleman Jordan Peterson, from Alberta, then Ontario, and I believe this take may be in Arizona now. So we see some commonalities here. But back in 2011, or thereabouts, in or about 2011, this guy Stephen Harper was the prime minister at the time, cut border security. Along the same area that Trump's complaining about now. Can you imagine that? A conservative created the problem. Now a conservative is pointing the finger at somebody else for the problem. And then a conservative is going to provide a fix, but he doesn't tell you what the fix is going to be, but he's going to fix everything for you. And make sure you have a white picket fence and you're able to have a dog and everybody can have a dog. That's just what I'm saying. So watch this right here very, very carefully.
On my devil's advocate hat.
Yes.
And I'm going to play Robin D'Angelo, despite wearing this Trump badge. And I'm going to say, well,
wearing this Trump badge. Okay, so that's enough of that. I'll provide a link in the description. You want to see the full interview? Well, it's very. See, here's the other thing. He did also a take recently with Glavin, this journalist, talking about the Liberals, Trudeau, and Pierre Poilievre, and the Conservatives, slagging the Liberals and propping up the Conservatives. But in all the takes that were put out publicly, no meat and bones, no content. There was no policy. There was no plan. Nothing concrete put on the table. Just slagging and saying it's bad for people. Just subjective subterfuge that's based on personal biases. But not putting anything on the table that can provide substance to what they state. And that's where I've got an issue with this way of doing things. I don't think it's appropriate. So we're going to go to a Canadian out west, a guy by the name of teacher, was a school teacher, still is an accredited school teacher from what I understand, to the best of my knowledge, but very pragmatic, insightful gentleman, and I think he puts good things out there. And I think it's prudent for people to be looking at these types of media information sources, because we've got a really big problem around the world now, and that's corporate terrorism. I'm going to put that word on the end, but it's corporate terrorism that is manipulating media because it's all about profits only. And then in Canada, we have something similar to the BBC in UK, a government-funded media called the CBC. Number one thing on the chopping list, or the chopping block, which was under the Harper chopping block as well, CBC. And they always do that. In the Toronto Sun, this girl Batra, some links with Ford and this guy Lilly. And I'm surprised Stephen LeDrew, which was a liberal, is definitely in their camp as well. So we're just lightly touching upon that. So right now, we're going to go to Steve Boots.
Now I want to talk about 5 worst things that happened in Canada. That was an easier list to make, although the main challenge was narrowing it down to 5, because good lord, what a year. Like literally, carnivorous squirrels didn't make the top 5. That's how bad it was. So the 5th spot on this list goes to Doug Ford, who is worse than carnivorous squirrels, specifically because of his destruction of the Ontario Science Centre and Ontario Place. Doug Ford knew that Ontarians didn't want to get rid of these landmarks, but he did it anyway. Rather than funding improvements to Ontario Place, he's just going to turn it into a spa. Don't worry though, it's a spa for everyone.
That's going to be the meat of really what this video here is that I'm doing now. Is Pierre Poilievre and Doug Ford and the Conservative Party in general across Canada. And it's relative to the United States too, because the same ideology is on both sides of the border. So today's focus is going to be Doug Ford, Pierre Poilievre. The fatally flawed 5. Take it away, Steve. Mr. Steve.
Now I want to talk about 5 worst things that happened in Canada. That was an easier list to make, although the main
Or, if you watch the Matrix, we'll just refer to him as Mr. Smith. Yikes.
challenge was narrowing it down to 5, because good lord, what a year. Like literally, carnivorous squirrels didn't make the top 5. That's how bad it was. So the 5th spot on this list goes to Doug Ford, who is worse than carnivorous squirrels, specifically because of his destruction of the Ontario Science Centre and Ontario Place. Doug Ford knew that Ontarians didn't want to get rid of these landmarks, but he did it anyway. Rather than funding improvements to Ontario Place, he's just going to turn it into a spa. Don't worry though, it's a spa for everyone, as long as you can afford a luxury spa. And it was going to have underground parking until underground parking was expensive, so now it's just going to have a mega parkade. I'm sure that's going to be gorgeous. And the Ontario Science Centre just couldn't stay in business except for that wedding that they stayed in business for. And the building was crumbling except for the fact that a bunch of schools are made out of the same stuff and are perfectly fine for some reason. And this is the issue. There's no honesty here at all. It's just Doug Ford trying to secure land and buildings and space for his developer buddies so they can do whatever they want. So they can get rich on the back of Ontarians. And who cares if Treasured Ontario landmarks are destroyed? Who cares if they're abandoned? Or who cares if the reasons for shutting them down are lies? Because Doug Ford gets what he wants. He wants Ontario Place to be a spa because his buddies want a spa. Seems pretty straightforward. And this is really...
Plus, the other thing you must understand, his he had a family business. Him and his brother Rob and his other brother, I forget his name, were running it. Guy wore a cowboy hat all the time. His name was Deco Labels. Initially, the business was started by the father, who was a longtime Conservative cabinet minister, I believe cabinet minister, but anyways, had a seat, Conservative seat in Parliament. Pretty sure member of Parliament, not a provincial Parliament, but I don't quote me on that for sure. So Doug's brother Rob, and Doug's been riding. The only reason why Doug is where he is off the coattails of his brother Rob. And that's my understanding from what I've personally experienced and seen, because I've talked to Rob one-on-one a couple of times before. So Doug, when his brother died, sold Deco Labels. The business mostly, they had a shop up just northwest of where Rob used to hang out for his drug buddies. Rob had a bit of a personal issue. We're not going to get into that, but he operated quite well as a counselor for his local constituents and really did take care of them. But nonetheless, Doug, this is the point of this, Doug sold Deco Labels. The guy that bought Deco Labels, the French, let's say a French interest, this new spa that's going up in Ontario Place, as a result of the demolition going forward of the Science Centre up at Daw Mills in Eglinton. The spa is going to be at Ontario Place, along with a small portion of the Science Centre. And the spa is going to be run by the French interest that bought Doug Ford's family business interests of Deco Labels. And that's a de facto fact. Without reservation. So, Steve here has presented the facts quite well about Doug Ford. And, you know, he's not off about the squirrel either. If you hang around parks, you know what these squirrels will do to one another.
Really the story of what Doug Ford's year was. Doing whatever he wants. Spending hundreds of millions of dollars to get alcohol in corner stores a bit sooner. Insisting that he's magically fixed housing while housing starts to decline. And now suspending the rights of the unhoused. Doing whatever he wants. Basically, really, the worst story of the year is just Doug Ford. At least on...
And that's the other issue. And he mentioned a couple of things about the alcohol, etc. But let's go with the housing issue. Housing issue in Canada is being blamed on Trudeau. And the issue with Ontario is being blamed on Trudeau. But the issue with Ontario, which is the engine of Canada, because you got to understand, you know, the financial centers are very limited in Canada, and Ontario is the main GDP energy that provides the fuel for the Canadian economy and Canada in general. We cover a huge mass, or Canada covers a huge mass, but only a few centers. So Ontario's engine of GDP for the country. And people have been slagging Trudeau for Ontario and Trudeau for Canada. But here's the problem. Number one, the overall situation, whether it's south of the 49th parallel, north of the 49th parallel, the basic foundation of the fiat economy framework is not designed for the modern day way of living. Nobody has spent time updating and recreating a new framework to provide a balanced, uplifting experience for all peoples. And that's the major fail. And this is a worldwide issue too, which requires collaborative efforts together instead of isolation and building walls. People need now to start building bridges and look at more innovative ways of sustaining the human being. Like, let's get out of this Darwinian ideology way of thinking, survival of the fittest, climbing on each other's backs to get ahead of one another. And the reason why I say that is you got to ask a question. Are you a human being or are you an animal? Darwinian ideology way of doing things is based on an animal. And we've taken that and created belief systems, loops, to create an existence of an animalistic existence, which is not our way of living. A human being is totally different. We're supposed to be a more sentient, higher level of consciousness, but we're pulling ourselves down and acting like animals. And only 1 or 10% of the population around the world is benefiting by it. And this is where the real travesty is, and nobody's discussing it. Nonetheless, I'm going to go back to Doug Ford, because Trudeau came into power in 2015, Doug Ford 2018, and the major problem with house prices, rental properties going up, is because of the actions of Doug Ford. Simple as that. And as Mr. Smith of the Matrix just said, rental properties. Now, rental properties in the States and in Canada now owned by corporations. Majority is owned by corporations. And what they do is they call them financialized landlords. And they created the cost of living to be, of renting, to put a roof over your head well above what should be only 30% of your income. Well above that. And recently the software that's used for most of these apartment buildings, which came from the States, originated from the States, have been accused of price fixing. And this is the reality of what's really going on. So you're blaming Trudeau, which I don't think is fair. Is he perfect? Far from perfect. But you see what's happened with Trump already. He's not even in, and he's looking to invade Canada and Greenland. The only way to get ahead, this guy, imperialistic way of thinking. It's not the 1800s, guys, or people, whether it be woman, man. It's not the 1800s. It's not the 1700s. You're in the 21st century, and by now you'd like to think the human being has evolved a lot more than what we're actually seeing and witnessing right now. So, back to the shoe.
Ontario, just generally, Doug. But the opposition's failed to mount any meaningful challenge to him, so it really looks like the least popular premier in Canada is somehow going to get re-elected. Really nailing it, Ontario. 10 out of 10. No notes. Next up, one of the worst stories of the year was...
So that's a conservative government in Ontario. Trump's Republican. That's conservative. Understand that.
Really two stories, which are in a lot of ways different, but share some key commonalities
What's
that
he
I think
saying?
make them go together on this list. They are sports scandals.
Okay, we're not getting into that. We're going to jump to 1400 on the dial. 1400 on the dial. 1400. There we go. 1359 is as close as we're going to get. And away we go.
Prospects. There are a different set of rules for athletes in a lot of contexts in Canada and around the world. And as long as that sort of culture exists, this kind of story is going to continue to happen. Because national sports aren't just
Let's
about
move
winning.
to the next there, Mr.
They
Smith.
should be aspirational. They should be to give us somebody to look up to as a nation. Larger than life figures that we can rally around.
I should have said
Something
1430.
to bond around as a nation.
So just
But
give
what
me 10
happens
more
when those
seconds,
figures
folks.
exist in
Then
a
we're going to
culture
move
that
to
wants
where
win at all
I want this
costs?
to be.
The next story I want to highlight is Danielle Smith's reign of lunacy.
Okay, so Danielle Smith. This is the Premier of Alberta. And another conservative government. We've got this trend around the world. And we've got this trend of going radical far right. And I don't like using right, left, or center because creating these boxes just creates further separation into ideologies, and people just get stuck in these boxes and can't think outside the box. That's the real issue. Can't think outside the box. Left-wing box, far left-wing, progressive, so many friggin' boxes. Same with the right-wing, far right-wing, extremist right-wing. It's a box, box, box. And then people, because they're so easily manipulated through the subconscious, get stuck in all these boxes and just end up with a lifetime argument. My way is better than your way. No way is the way. And that is the way of building bridges and living in harmony. That's the way you want to live. So here's Danielle Smith now.
She has been running Alberta like her own little political fiefdom, changing ethics rules, changing freedom of information rules, and changing basically everything. She's rewriting the province as she sees fit. She's made changes to the Alberta Bill of Rights, thrown out boards of multiple public institutions, installed Stephen Harper in a prominent position, and more.
And here's another thing. Stephen Harper, back to 2011 at least, might have been a few times earlier than that, any border issue that Trump has, and it's not really an issue, but Trump's made it an issue. But if you're going to say we've failed or faltered at any part, like it's really insignificant, making an issue out of a non sequitur. But it was Stephen Harper that caused what may be a border issue. Nobody else. It was a conservative that caused the issue. Now you got a conservative here, there's Danielle Smith. She might very well break away and become a state of the. If anybody's going to break away, Danielle Smith and the Alberta government's going to do it. It'll be interesting to see going forward what happens there.
Literally every week, there's another story of another absolutely bonkers thing coming out of the Alberta government. It is too much to keep up with, and that's by design. Danielle Smith's keeping the media environment on its heels because they cannot keep up with all of the ludicrous things that she's throwing out there at any given time. Overhaul the education system? Why not? New curriculum? Sure. Entirely new healthcare system? Sure. Restructuring public pensions? Sure. New ethics rules? Sure. And so on and so on and so on. It just goes on. Danielle Smith is changing everything she can about Alberta, and she's doing it so quickly that nobody can keep up. And for a while, it seemed like this was happening because she was scared. Like she was trying to shore up her political base in order to survive a potential leadership review. Then she had the leadership review and won in resounding fashion. So I guess it wasn't that. Turns out she just likes to wreak havoc, likes to target vulnerable groups, and likes to play populist politics, and likes power. Danielle Smith's been a disaster for Alberta, and it's only going to get worse. We need the Alberta NDP to step it up, get Nod Nenshi elected into the House, and to work on holding Danielle Smith to account in preparation for the next election. The next story I want to highlight is deeply concerning and affected all of Canada. It is the return of Donald Trump and the rise of the right wing, specifically an authoritarian populist strain of right-wing politics that has emerged both south and north of the borders. John Rossett came uncomfortably close to becoming Premier of British Columbia. Pierre Poilievre seems to be on the inside track to becoming Prime Minister of Canada. Donald Trump just rose to the presidency. Scott Moe won another majority government in Saskatchewan.
Yeah, so Pierre Poilievre actually, if Jagmeet Singh forces an election thinking that Jagmeet Singh will become the next prime minister, he's dreaming. All he's going to do is get Pierre Poilievre into the driver's seat sooner than October, when by law we have to have a federal election. October 2025. Ideally, the best situation from my perspective is that Justin Trudeau hold the line, toe the line, get better at what he's doing, get supported by Jagmeet Singh, and learn to work with the Liberal government for the betterment of the Canadian people, so that people can actually see how Donald Trump and his way of governing is going to work. So by the time October comes around, maybe we'll see a different story with the way people think. Just saying, I think that's the ideal situation, because I think people have been misled, do not really understand what the real issues are overall and how it works how it affects their daily life. And all they're doing is just blaming the guy in power. And everybody says it, and once one person says it, it's a brush fire. So it just becomes belief. It's as simple as that. So we're going to move ahead to 2107. 2107? Yeah, 2147. 2147. Some great content here from Mr. Steve Boots. Okie dokie dokie. Here we go.
Hearing what Celine Dion was going through and thinking her career had come to an end, only to find out that she was able to come back and in truly remarkable fashion and make basically the entire world cry simultaneously. Amazing. But if we're going to talk about people who need to be recognized as being extraordinarily impactful Canadians this year, people who have made the lives of others better, I'm going to add one more controversial name to this list: Justin Trudeau. Yeah, he screwed up a lot. Don't worry, he'll be on the bad list too. But he did have a really significant impact on the public and on Canadian life. We have the National Dental Care Plan, the National Pharmacare Plan, the National School Food Lunch Plan. And while none of these plans are perfect and none of these plans do everything we want them to do, they are something. They've materially improved the conditions of the lives of Canadians.
Yeah, so these plans that he's outlined just now, the dental plan, etc., it's a good start to moving everything in the right direction for all the people of Canada. And that's what you have to understand. Whether you like what's going on, this is a very unique time in the history of mankind, modern mankind. And it doesn't matter who you have, nobody's going to make it better than what it is right now. And we have to rally together to make it better. Develop better understandings, develop better policies, develop better plans, and not just concepts of rhetoric of nonsense.
Now, that does not absolve him from a lot of the terrible governing he's done this year. There's a lot of that. A lot. So very much. But I
That's
also think
correct.
it's worth acknowledging the good. Justin Trudeau often gets framed as being some sort of unanimously bad historical catastrophe, but in reality, it's a lot more complicated than that. He's going to go down in history as a very divisive figure. He's accomplished a lot of good, but he's also left a lot of Canadians feeling excluded, frustrated, and ignored. And I think it's important to know both.
Okay, so before we get into the truly dreadful bunch, which is the point of this here, I just want to further pontificate on what he just spoke about Trudeau. It's not been perfect. Got to remember, the guy was elected 2015, green behind the ears, took over from a guy by the name of Michael Ignatieff that went over to Hungary to run a library. And guess what happened there? Poor Michael has to live under this guy named Orban. Now he's seeing what real authoritarianism in Europe is and how it has festered and becomes a reality. So, unfortunately, that's the case there. But Trump is an issue. He's an authoritarian. He wants to make Canada the 51st state. This girl Danielle Smith might go that way because Alberta has always been a wild card in the history since Confederation. And it's just their dependence on carbon fossil fuels more than anything. And that's why they have and will always have an issue. They just cannot get out of that way of thinking and be more progressive and develop different ways of doing things, because that's what is necessary.
But now I want to highlight 5 Canadians who I think have had truly remarkable negative impacts, because there were a lot of folks this year who just kind of sucked. And if we're going to talk about people who are terrible, we can't start that conversation without mentioning Pierre Poilievre. He is...
Okay, so I'm going to just jump right in. Wholeheartedly agree. This guy, Pierre Poilievre, will not help Canada. He has no policy. He has no plan. He has no concepts of any possible ways of making the life better of Canadian, or making the life of Canadians better. And all he has is what Trump had was concepts. And the concepts are just fantasy land stuff. Bringing it home. Just all these lines that resonate with people because people can't think for themselves. Gives them a warm, fuzzy feeling because he has these good one-liners. That's all it is. It's a one-liner bringing it home. It's just a one-liner. It's not going to happen. You can walk home any day of the week. Anybody can do that. How can we adjust the way we live on a daily basis in a different manner that is better for the people? And all that Pierre Poilievre has right now is the standard conservative, which was the same thing with Trump. Going to shore up the borders. We're going to build the bridges. We're not going to build bridges. We're just going to build walls and give tax breaks. Hasn't worked for 50 years. Why is it going to, or longer? Why? But now the demographics are so much different. And that's why I say longer, because at one time it actually did help, but because of the demographics, which are substantially different in the present day of 2024, 2025, tax breaks are not going to work. They can work in interesting situations, providing you have a plan of other things that are the main focus. And a tax break might help with that. But any tax break that the Conservatives have right now, it's a false narrative. It's not going to help. Definitely can tell you right now. It's not going to help. And you can prove me wrong. Simple as that. Put it in the comments. This guy has not said anything nice, anything uplifting, has no plan. And you want to entertain him? He's got the popular vote right now before a vote. This guy's a mistake. Do you want a loving father, or do you want a father that's mean? Pain and suffering, or positive, uplifting, and in harmony? I don't know why people like pain and suffering. The American people took on Trump, and now they're seeing pain and suffering.
Has been a blight on the face of Canadian politics over the last year. He has lowered the quality of the conversation around politics, driven a focus on sloganeering, and is turned into a singularly attack-focused politician. Anyone who criticizes him must be terrible and deserves to be attacked, clearly. He's brought a degree of toxicity and bile into the Canadian political landscape that hasn't been seen for a long time. Now, I want to be really clear here that I disagree with not only his policies, but more than that, his approach. Everything is personal. Everything is as cruel and as mean as possible. He calls his opponents corrupt and incompetent. He accuses Jagmeet Singh of being focused on his pension all the time, even though he's got a way bigger pension. He accuses Trudeau of being incompetent and corrupt and how everybody but him is terrible somehow. But he can't offer a single straight answer about anything. There's no real policy, there's just slogans. When he's asked a difficult question, he literally runs away. He is a singularly awful politician that has been a disgrace to Canadian politics for years, but in 2024, he escalated it to irredeemable levels. The next individual I want to highlight who had an incredibly negative impact was BC Liberal, then BC United, then Nothing leader Kevin Falcon. He somehow...
Okay, we're not going to go into this part here, but I wanted to focus on Pierre Poilievre because that's the major thing that we need to focus on going forward. And we're going to move to, what do we got here on my notes here? 2609 on the dial. 2609. See, Steve just brings forth some great content for me to work with. I had other stuff planned for this, but this, I think, is more succinct and to the point for the purpose of what I'm trying to, the point I'm trying to make here. Okay.
Year in review special. We've got 5 excellent things, 5 less excellent things, 5 heroes, and 5 heels. But I do want to take a moment to talk about one story that doesn't really fit into any of those categories but needs to be highlighted. Because this year, Canada said goodbye to one of its pillars of Canadian society. A man whose good works and kind spirit are going to have echoes in the fabric of this nation for an immeasurable amount of time. Justice Murray Sinclair. He led the National Truth and Reconciliation Commission with compassion, wisdom, and understanding to a degree that's just hard to imagine. He was given the most impossible job, maybe in Canadian history, and he did it. And he didn't just do it, he excelled. He made people feel seen, made people feel heard, and more than anything, he made people feel safe to tell their stories. Murray Sinclair is a one-of-a-kind Canadian who deserves all of the recognition we can give him and more. There are very few people you can look at in Canadian history and unequivocally say they made things better. They left things better than they found them. And that is something you can truly say of Justice Murray Sinclair. And we'd be remiss if we didn't take a moment to reflect on his service and his life. And so on that note, one final thing I want to leave you with. A profound thank you. This year has been absolutely wild and has changed my life completely. And the reason why is because you folks have chosen to watch. You've chosen to subscribe, clicked on my Patreon, or whatever it is. But the fact is, I spent my whole life dreaming of having my own Canadian version of The Daily Show or The Colbert Report, but my own kind of thing. And then one day, I just started, and you watched it. And now I have it. And that's because of you. You made my dreams come true.
Yeah, you've put the work in and done what needs to be done.
Happy holidays. Take care of yourselves, folks.
There you go. So there we go, folks. We're leaving with that. We're leaving on a jet plane, Petulia Clark. So anyways, that's my point. Fact of the matter is, everybody wants to get rid of Trudeau. Just like Joe Biden. Joe Biden was an old guy. The young people said he was an old guy, dinosaur. Meanwhile, this guy Trump's 78, 79 soon. You know, like, the guy's friggin' illiterate. And we've seen what's happening here. What's happening in Canada mirrors what's happened in the United States. And you're going to see some similarities in Europe as well because of the times. Unique times. And the fuel to create these unique times was COVID, worst pandemic in 100 years, created a supply and demand issue which rocked the financial stability around the world, which created an inflation thing. But what it did bring or allowed to bubble to the surface is how broken the economic system is around the world, how broken the framework to deal with these situations when they do arise, how broken that is. And the fact of the matter is, it's created an opportunity for politicians to take advantage of people that have been hurt by these circumstantial things that have happened, so that they can manipulate the reins of government for their own personal purpose as the number one. Instead of for the people, for themselves. And just an ego stroke. Just an ego stroke. Once you have somebody in power that has no policy, no plan, and no real concepts of any type of tangibility, they're just working on your emotional insecurities. Whatever fear they've created is to manipulate them, put them in a position of power, and they're going to promise all sorts of things, but it's only for their benefit only. It's not for the people. And this is what you have to understand. Do you want a goodwill, loving situation where everybody benefits, nobody's left behind? Just like the Marines, we don't leave anybody behind. Or do you want pain and suffering? Pain and suffering are goodwill and fostering goodwill, building bridges, building good relationships, or building walls, virtual walls, and creating pain and suffering. It's your choice, folks. Start asking for what works best for everybody, for your family, for you, for your community, and for your country, and for everybody. Get off this pain and suffering thing. Like, who wants pain and suffering? You really want that? It's your choice. It's up to you. It's up to you. We'll leave you with that. Love and peace. Questions, comments, throw in the comments section. And a happy new year to everybody. Love and peace. Thank you. Talk to you soon.